Okay, so imagine this. You're one of the biggest superstars on the planet. Your face is literally everywhere. Billions of people know your name. You've performed at the United Nations. You've spoken at the Grammy stage. And yet, somewhere out there, your mom, your dad, your brother, or your grandma is sitting on a variety show or a live broadcast, casually dropping the most hilariously embarrassing stories about your dreams. The kind of dreams you'd literally pay money to keep secret. The kind that make you want to bury your face in a pillow and never come out. And guess what? These stories didn't just stay in the family group chat. No. They went viral. Millions of people heard them. And the members of BTS themselves could do absolutely nothing about it, because it was their own families who exposed them. Now here's the thing. Have you ever wondered what happens when the world's most powerful idol group lets their guard down in their sleep? What kind of bizarre, absurd, and downright ridiculous dreams do these 7 guys have behind the scenes? Can you even imagine Jungkook talking in his sleep about something so random it left his family speechless? Or what about a member whose dream was so weird that even the other members couldn't stop laughing about it for weeks? And what if I told you one member's family revealed a childhood dream so unexpectedly innocent that it completely shattered his tough image? Yeah, all of that happened, and we've got receipts. So buckle up, because in this video, we're counting down the 7 most embarrassing dreams of BTS members that were leaked by their very own families, from the mildly cringe to the absolutely unforgettable. And trust me, by the time we reach number 1, you are not going to believe what was exposed. Let's get into it.
Number 7. J-Hope, the dance king who secretly dreamed of being a farmer. Alright, so let's kick things off with number 7, and honestly, this one already sets the tone for how wild this list is gonna get, because we're talking about none other than Young Hoseok, the man the world knows as J-Hope, BTS's eternal sunshine. The guy whose energy on stage is so electrifying that he literally earned the nickname Dance King from fans and industry professionals alike. The member who was already winning national dance competitions as a teenager, the guy who moved to Seoul with nothing but a suitcase and a dream to become one of the greatest performers of his generation, and yet, behind all of that fire, behind all of that ambition, behind all of those razor-sharp choreographies and show-stopping performances, there was a little boy in Gwangju who once had a very, very different dream, and the only reason the world knows about it is because his own mother, the legendary Mama Young, decided to share it during a family interview segment that aired in South Korea, and when she said it, J-Hope's face turned so red that even the camera couldn't hide it. So here's what happened. During one of those special segments where BTS families were invited to share personal stories about the members, J-Hope's mother sat down with this warm, nostalgic smile on her face. The kind of smile only a mother has when she's about to absolutely destroy her son's cool image in front of millions of people, and she started talking about how little Hoseok, when he was about 5 or 6 years old, went through this phase where he was completely and utterly obsessed with the idea of becoming a farmer, not a dancer, not a singer, not a performer, but a full-on, boots in the mud, rice paddy walking, tractor driving farmer. And the reason was so innocent and so pure that it honestly makes you want to go back in time and just protect little Hoseok at all costs. Apparently, J-Hope's family used to visit relatives in the countryside during holidays, and young Hoseok was absolutely fascinated by the animals, the open fields, the fresh air, the whole peaceful vibe of rural life. And one day he came home and announced to his entire family with the most serious face a 5-year-old could muster that he was going to grow up to be the greatest farmer in all of South Korea, and not just any farmer, oh no. He specifically said he wanted to raise cows and chickens and have a huge garden where he could grow watermelons because watermelon was his favorite fruit, and he was dead serious about it, like this wasn't a passing thought. This was a full life plan that little Hoseok had mapped out in his tiny brain. His mom said he even drew pictures of his future farm, complete with stick figure cows and a little house with smoke coming out of the chimney, and he would show these drawings to anyone who visited the house, proudly declaring that this was going to be his life. And every single family member just played along because how do you say no to a face that adorable? Now here's where it gets even funnier and more embarrassing. His mom revealed that this farming obsession lasted not just a few weeks, not just a few months, but almost 2 full years, and during that time, Little Hoseok would refuse to watch anything on TV that wasn't related to farming or animals. He would throw mini tantrums if they didn't stop by the countryside on weekends. And he even started waking up early in the morning because he heard that real farmers wake up at dawn. So this tiny kindergartner was setting his own alarm clock and marching around the house at 5 in the morning, pretending to do farm chores, which basically meant he was just moving things from one side of the living room to the other and calling it harvesting. His mother was laughing so hard while telling this story that she could barely finish, and J-Hope, who was watching this segment later, was reportedly so embarrassed that he called his mom immediately after it aired and was like, "Mom, why would you tell them that?" Of all things, and she just laughed and said, "Because it's cute, and the world should know you weren't always this cool." And you know what makes this story hit even deeper when you think about it? The fact that J-Hope eventually left that farming dream behind when he discovered street dancing at around age 7 or 8, and the same passion, the same obsession, the same all-or-nothing energy that he poured into his farming fantasy. He redirected into dance, and that's exactly the energy that carried him through years of underground dance battles in Gwangju, through the brutal trainee system at Big Hit Entertainment, through the tears and the doubt and the moments where he almost gave up, all the way to performing in front of 90,000 people at SoFi Stadium as a member of the biggest boy band in the history of music. So in a way, that little farmer boy from Gwangju didn't disappear. He just planted different seeds, and instead of growing watermelons, he grew a legacy, and honestly, if that doesn't make you feel something, I don't know what will. But the embarrassment factor is real though, because to this day, whenever the other BTS members want to tease J-Hope, all they have to do is make a cow sound or pretend to drive a tractor, and Hoseok immediately goes into full "please stop, I'm begging you" mode, and ARMY, being ARMY, has turned this entire story into memes, fan art, and even fan fiction where J-Hope actually becomes a farmer after BTS, and honestly, the man can never escape it, and that, my friends, is why his mother's innocent little story lands right here at number 7 on our list. But don't get too comfortable, because if you think a farming dream is embarrassing, wait until you hear what the next member's family revealed. It involves a dream so absurd that the member literally tried to deny it ever happened. But the evidence was already out there, and there was no taking it back. Stay locked in. Number 6. Jimin, the worldwide handsome who dreamed of becoming a fairy princess. Coming in at number 6, we've got a story that is so unexpectedly hilarious, so beautifully absurd, and so perfectly on brand for the man involved that when it first came out, the entire internet collectively lost its mind. Because we're talking about Kim Seokjin, the eldest member of BTS, the self-proclaimed worldwide handsome, the man who radiates confidence like it's a built-in feature, the guy who once looked into a mirror on live television and said, "I know why I'm popular," without a single ounce of irony. The member whose dad jokes are so legendary that they've been compiled into actual books, and yet, this same man, this pillar of confidence and charisma, once had a childhood dream so hilariously unexpected that when his older brother Kim Seokjung revealed it during a broadcast, Jimin literally froze on camera, like someone had just pressed the pause button on his entire existence. Now, before we get into what the dream actually was, you need to understand something about Jin's brother Seokjung, because this man is basically Jin's natural enemy when it comes to maintaining any kind of dignified public image. Seokjung has zero filter, zero mercy, and an absolute treasure chest of embarrassing Jin stories that he has been strategically deploying over the years like a man on a mission to remind the world that before Kim Seokjin was worldwide handsome, he was just a weird little kid from Anyang who did weird little kid things, and this particular story might be the crown jewel of Seokjung's collection. So here's what went down. During a special family episode where BTS members' relatives were sharing childhood memories, Seokjung came on with that signature older brother energy. You know the type, that calm, slightly evil smile that tells you he's about to absolutely end someone's career, and he started talking about how when Jin was around 4 or 5 years old, he went through an intense phase where he was completely and totally convinced that he was going to grow up to become a fairy princess, not a prince, not a knight, Not a superhero, a fairy princess, specifically the kind with sparkly wings, a magic wand, and a big pink dress, and according to Seokjung, this wasn't just some random thing Jin said once, oh no. This was a full-blown lifestyle commitment that consumed little Seokjun's entire world for the better part of a year. Seokjung explained that it all started when Jin watched a particular animated fairy tale show on Korean television, and he became absolutely mesmerized by the main character. Who was this elegant fairy princess who could fly around and grant wishes and make flowers bloom with a wave of her wand? And something about that character just captured little Seokjun's imagination in the most intense way possible, and from that moment on, he declared to his family that this was his destiny. He was going to be a fairy princess. End of discussion. No negotiations. And here's where the details get absolutely golden, because Seokjung revealed that Jin would take his mother's scarves and tie them around his shoulders like a cape. He would grab any stick he could find and wave it around the house like a magic wand. He would stand in front of the mirror and practice what he called his fairy face, which was basically him squinting his eyes and puckering his lips in the most ridiculous way possible, and he would run around the apartment with his arms spread out making whooshing sounds because he genuinely believed that if he practiced hard enough, he would eventually learn to fly, and the funniest part, according to Seokjung, was that Jin would get genuinely upset, like tears in his eyes upset, when his family tried to gently explain to him that fairy princesses weren't real and that boys typically didn't become fairy princesses because in Jin's 4-year-old logic, anything was possible if you wanted it badly enough, and honestly, looking at where he ended up in life, maybe that logic wasn't entirely wrong. But wait, it gets even better, because Seokjung dropped one more devastating detail that sent the entire audience into absolute hysterics. He said that little Jin once went to kindergarten wearing a makeshift fairy princess outfit that he had assembled himself using a pink towel as a dress, aluminum foil shaped into a crown, and 2 pieces of cardboard taped to his back as wings. And when the teacher called home to politely inform their parents that their son had arrived at school dressed as a fairy princess, Jin's mother had to come pick him up, and on the car ride home, little Seokjun wasn't embarrassed at all. He was actually upset that the teacher didn't appreciate his outfit, and he said, and this is a direct quote according to Seokjung, "The teacher doesn't understand fashion," which, honestly, if that isn't the most Jin thing you've ever heard in your life, I don't know what is, because this is literally the same energy he carries today as an adult, that unshakable confidence. That refusal to care about what other people think, that absolute commitment to being himself no matter how ridiculous it might seem, it was all there at age 4, just wrapped in aluminum foil and a pink towel. Now when this story aired, Jin's reaction was absolutely priceless. Multiple accounts from people close to the situation say he immediately called Seokjung, and the conversation was basically Jin yelling "Hyung-why" over and over while Seokjung just laughed in the background, and of course, the BTS members were absolutely ruthless about it. Suga reportedly couldn't stop calling Jin Princess Seokjun for weeks. Jungkook apparently made Jin a little paper crown and left it on his studio chair with a note that said, "For our fairy princess," and V kept randomly humming fairy tale music whenever Jin walked into the room, and Jin, being Jin, eventually leaned into it the way only he can. He started making jokes about it himself, saying things like, "Well, I didn't become a fairy princess, but I became something better. I became worldwide handsome," which is basically the same thing but without the wings. And you know what? There's actually something really meaningful underneath all the comedy here, because Jin's childhood dream of being a fairy princess, as silly as it sounds, reveals something fundamental about who he is as a person. He has always been someone who is completely unapologetic about what he loves, someone who refuses to be boxed in by expectations, someone who will wear a pink towel to kindergarten and call it fashion without a second thought, and that exact same fearless I don't care what you think energy is what made him one of the most beloved idols in the world. A man who does eat Jin on live broadcast, who wears ridiculous costumes for fan meetings, who makes himself the punchline of his own jokes because he's secure enough in who he is to laugh at himself. And it all started with a little boy in Anyang who just wanted to be a fairy princess, and honestly, in the hearts of ARMY around the world. He kind of already is one. But listen, if you thought Jin's fairy princess era was peak embarrassment, you are absolutely not ready for number 5, because the next story involves a member whose family revealed a recurring dream so bizarre, so completely out of left field, that it made headlines not just in Korea but internationally, and when you hear the details, you're going to understand why this member reportedly begged their family to never bring it up again. But of course, it was already too late. Number 5. RM. The genius leader who had a recurring dream about being chased by giant talking potatoes. Alright, number 5, and this is where things take a hard left turn into absolute absurdity, because we're talking about Kim Namjoon, the man the world knows as RM, the leader of BTS, the guy with a verified IQ of 148, the self-taught English speaker, the man who delivers speeches at the United Nations General Assembly with the composure of a seasoned diplomat, the philosopher-rapper who reads Nietzsche and Haruki Murakami for fun, the member who visits art museums in every city BTS tours in, who has a personal library that would make a university professor jealous, the guy whose lyrics are so intellectually layered that there are entire university courses dedicated to analyzing them, and yet, this same towering intellectual, this walking encyclopedia of wisdom and depth, had a recurring childhood dream so completely and utterly ridiculous that when his mother revealed it during a Korean television appearance, the studio audience laughed so hard that production had to pause filming for a full minute, and Namjoon, who was not present during the filming but watched it later, reportedly sat in complete silence for a solid 30 seconds before putting his head in his hands and just staying there, motionless, like a man whose entire carefully constructed intellectual image had just been dismantled by the one person on earth who knows every single embarrassing thing about him, his own mother. So here's the story, and I need you to really prepare yourself for this, because no amount of mental preparation is truly going to be enough. RM's mother, who is known among fans as one of the warmest and most endearing BTS parents, appeared on a segment where she was asked about funny or unusual things Namjoon did as a child, and she started off innocently enough, talking about how little Namjoon was always curious, always asking questions, always taking things apart to see how they worked. The classic gifted child behavior that everyone already knew about, but then the interviewer pushed a little further and asked if there was anything that young Namjoon was ever embarrassed about, and that's when his mother's eyes lit up with that unmistakable look. That look that every child on earth fears. The look that says, "Oh, I've been waiting for someone to ask me this," and she said, almost too casually, "Well, there was the potato dream." And the entire studio went quiet for a second because nobody knew where this was going, and then she explained that from roughly the age of 6 to about 8 years old, Namjoon had a recurring dream, and in this dream, he was being chased through the streets of his neighborhood by giant potatoes, not regular potatoes, but enormous, human-sized potatoes with faces, arms, and legs, and these potatoes could talk, and they were angry, and the reason they were angry, according to what little Namjoon reported to his mother every single time he had this dream, was because he had eaten French fries for dinner, and the potato army was coming to avenge their fallen comrades, and every time, without fail, the dream would end with Namjoon getting cornered in an alley by the leader of the potatoes, who was apparently this massive, scarred, battle-worn potato wearing what Namjoon described as a tiny general's hat. And this potato general would point at Namjoon and say, "You ate my family." And then Namjoon would wake up screaming. Now let that sink in for a moment. The future leader of BTS, the man who would one day stand before world leaders and speak about the importance of self-love and youth empowerment, was having full-blown nightmares about vengeful sentient potatoes with military leadership structures, and it wasn't a one-time thing. His mother said this dream happened at least 2 or 3 times a month for nearly 2 years. And it got to the point where little Namjoon developed an actual temporary aversion to potatoes. He refused to eat French fries. He refused to eat potato soup. He wouldn't even look at the potato section in the grocery store without getting visibly uncomfortable. And his parents were genuinely concerned enough that they considered taking him to see someone about it. But then one day, Just as mysteriously as it had started, the dream stopped, and Namjoon went back to eating potatoes like nothing ever happened. And when his mother asked him years later if he remembered the potato dreams, teenage Namjoon apparently turned bright red and said, "We agreed to never talk about that," which of course only confirmed that he remembered every single terrifying detail. But the real comedy gold came after this story aired, because the BTS members, as you can probably imagine, showed absolutely zero mercy, and the group chat apparently exploded with potato memes. Jin reportedly bought an actual potato, drew a face on it with a marker, put a tiny paper hat on it, and placed it on Namjoon's desk in the studio with a note that said, "I'm coming for you," and Suga, in his classic deadpan style, apparently walked into a meeting, looked at Namjoon, and just said, "So, the potatoes, huh?" and walked out without saying another word. And V started sending Namjoon random photos of potatoes at 3 in the morning with no context, and Jimin kept humming dramatic chase music every time they passed a restaurant that served French fries. And J-Hope, being the chaotic sunshine that he is, actually went out and bought one of those giant inflatable potato costumes from a Halloween store and wore it to rehearsal one day and just stood behind Namjoon without saying anything until Namjoon turned around and nearly jumped out of his skin, and apparently the entire room was in tears laughing while Namjoon just stood there with his hand on his chest trying to recover from what he later described as the most unnecessary jump scare of my life. And ARMY went absolutely wild with this information. Within hours of the broadcast, there were fan animations of RM being chased by potato armies. There were fan songs. There were potato general fan accounts on Twitter. Someone even made a full short film about it that got millions of views. And to this day, whenever RM does a live broadcast and someone in the comments mentions potatoes, you can see this very specific look flash across his face. It's not anger. It's not amusement. It's this deeply personal mix of, "I can't believe this is still following me," and "I love my mom, but she really did not have to do that." And honestly, here's the thing that makes this story more than just funny. When you really think about it, there's something kind of poetic about a child whose imagination was so vivid, so powerful, so incredibly detailed that he could construct an entire narrative mythology around angry potatoes with military ranks and personal vendettas, because that same imagination, that same ability to build entire worlds inside his head, is exactly what made RM one of the greatest lyricists and storytellers in modern music history. The kid who dreamed about potato generals grew up to write Mono, Indigo, and some of the most emotionally complex music of the 21st century, and maybe, just maybe, we have those terrifying potatoes to thank for pushing Namjoon's creative brain into overdrive at such a young age. So in a weird way, those potatoes didn't just chase him, they chased him toward greatness. And if that's not the most absurd origin story you've ever heard for a global music icon, I honestly don't know what is. But hold on, don't even think about clicking away, because number 4 is coming up next, and I am telling you right now, the story at number 4 hits completely different. We're talking about a member whose family didn't just reveal one embarrassing dream. They revealed the aftermath of that dream, the physical, real-world evidence that this dream actually affected this member's behavior in ways that are so funny and so humanizing that you will never look at this idol the same way again, and trust me, when you find out who it is, your jaw is going to drop. Number 4. Suga, the savage genius who dreamed he was a baby cat and started meowing in his sleep. Number 4, and oh my god, buckle up because this one is a masterpiece of family betrayal, and I say that with the utmost love and respect because the member at the center of this story is none other than Min Youngie, the man the world knows as Suga. Also known as August D, BTS's resident savage, the producer with the sharpest tongue in K-pop, the guy who once looked directly into a camera and said, "I don't care," with enough conviction to make it a life philosophy, the member whose resting face alone has made interviewers nervous. The man who built an entire brand around being cool, unbothered, and effortlessly intimidating. And if you're an ARMY, you already know that Suga's entire public persona is built on this foundation of, "I'm too cool to be embarrassed by anything," and for years, that wall seemed impenetrable, absolutely bulletproof, until one fateful day when his older brother, Min Jungji, decided to share a story so devastatingly adorable. So hilariously contradictory too. Everything Suga represents, that it didn't just crack the wall, it blew the entire thing to pieces and left behind nothing but the image of a tiny Min Youngie curled up in bed meowing like a kitten, and I promise you, I am not making this up. So here's what happened. Min Jungji, who has occasionally appeared in interviews and family segments over the years, was asked to share a memorable childhood story about his younger brother, and he started by saying, with this very calm, almost clinical delivery that somehow made it even funnier, "Youngie is going to kill me for this, but the world needs to know," and right there, right at that moment, you could feel the entire audience lean forward because they knew something catastrophic was coming, and Jungji did not disappoint. He explained that when Youngie was about 7 or 8 years old, their family had a neighbor who owned several cats, and little Youngie became absolutely obsessed with these cats. He would spend hours sitting on the neighbor's porch just watching them, petting them, talking to them, and according to Jungji, Youngie didn't just love these cats the way a normal kid loves animals. No, Youngie wanted to be a cat. He was fascinated by the way they moved, the way they slept all day and only became active when they felt like it, the way they demanded attention on their own terms and then just walked away when they were done. And if you're thinking, wait, that actually sounds exactly like adult Suga, you're absolutely right. And that's what makes this whole thing even more incredible. But the dream part is where this story goes from cute to legendary, because Jungji revealed that during this cat obsession phase, Youngie started having recurring dreams where he was a baby kitten, not a grown cat, a tiny, fluffy, newborn kitten. And in these dreams, he was apparently living with a cat family, being fed by a mother cat, playing with other kittens, and just living his best feline life without a single human worry in the world, and that on its own would have been a cute little childhood anecdote that everyone could laugh about and move on. But the problem, the glorious, hilarious, unforgettable problem, was what happened while Youngie was having these dreams, because according to Jungji, who shared a room with Youngie at the time, little Youngie didn't just dream about being a cat, he physically acted it out in his sleep. Jungji said he would wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of his little brother making soft meowing sounds from his bed, not loud, not dramatic, but these quiet, genuine, heartfelt little mew 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 sounds, like a real kitten calling for its mother. And the first time it happened, Jungji was so confused and startled that he actually got up and turned on the light thinking there was a real cat in the room, only to find 7-year-old Youngie curled up in the tightest little ball you've ever seen, his hands tucked under his chin like paws, making the most peaceful, contented kitten sounds imaginable, completely asleep, completely unaware, completely living his best cat life in dreamland, while his older brother stood there in the dark trying to process what he was witnessing. And it didn't happen once, oh no, Jungji said this went on for months, multiple times a week, to the point where he actually started keeping a mental log of Youngie's cat nights, because the patterns were so consistent. And he noticed that the meowing was always worse on days when Youngie had spent more time with the neighbor's cats. Like the more cat exposure he got during the day, the deeper into his feline alter ego he went at night. And there were even nights where Jungji said Youngie would physically move in his sleep, doing this little pawing motion with his hands against the pillow, kneading it exactly the way cats do when they're comfortable, and occasionally he would stretch out his whole body in that slow, arching way that cats stretch after a nap, and then curl right back up into his kitten ball and continue meowing, and Jungji said he eventually just accepted it as part of his nightly routine, like, oh, it's 2 a.m., Youngie's being a cat again, cool, going back to sleep. But here's where the story reaches its absolute peak, because Jungji revealed one specific night that he will never, ever forget. a night where Youngi's cat dream apparently reached some kind of climax, because instead of the usual quiet meowing, Youngi suddenly let out this loud, startlingly realistic cat yowl in the middle of the night, the kind of sound a cat makes when it's surprised or upset, and it was so loud and so convincing that it woke up not just Jungji, but their parents in the next room, and their father actually came rushing in with a broom thinking a stray cat had gotten into the house, and when they turned on the light, there was Youngi, still completely asleep, still curled up in his kitten position, still gently meowing like nothing had happened, while his entire family stood around his bed at 3 in the morning holding a broom and trying not to laugh so hard that they woke him up, and Jungji said their mother had to leave the room because she was laughing so hard she was crying, and their father just slowly lowered the broom, shook his head, and whispered, "This kid is something else," before going back to bed. Now, when this story reached the BTS members and eventually the public, the fallout was absolutely spectacular, because this is Min Youngi we're talking about. The man who has literally said on camera that his spirit animal is a rock because rocks don't have to do anything. The guy whose savage comebacks are legendary. The producer who works until 4 in the morning crafting beats that go hard enough to shake stadiums, and now the entire world knew that this same man used to meow in his sleep and need his pillow like a baby kitten, and the contrast was so extreme, so perfectly ironic, that it became one of the most viral BTS family stories of all time. The members, predictably, were absolutely merciless. Jin started calling him Lil Meow Meow, which ARMY immediately adopted, and which became one of Suga's most enduring fan nicknames. Jungkook recorded himself doing an impression of sleeping Youngi complete with the kitten sounds and sent it to the group chat. J-Hope bought a cat ear headband and placed it on Suga's head during a behind-the-scenes moment, and Suga's reaction, that slow, deadly turn of the head followed by the most withering stare in human history, became one of the most iconic BTS reaction gifs of all time, and RM, ever the intellectual, apparently told Suga, "Hyung, this actually explains a lot about your personality." To which Suga reportedly replied with just one word, "delete," which of course made everyone laugh even harder. And here's the beautiful, beautiful irony that ties this whole thing together, because fans have pointed out time and time again that adult Suga's behavior is actually remarkably cat-like in ways that go far beyond coincidence. He sleeps more than any other member. He's independent and prefers solitude. He shows affection on his own terms and only when he feels like it. He can go from completely disinterested to intensely focused in a split second, and he has this quiet, observant energy that is textbook feline. So maybe those childhood dreams weren't just dreams. Maybe little Youngi really did channel some kind of cat energy that became a permanent part of who he is, and honestly, that might be the most Min Youngi origin story possible. The man didn't just dream about being a cat. He apparently manifested it into his entire personality, and his brother made sure the whole world knew about it. But listen, as adorable and destructive as that story was, we are only at number 4, which means there are 3 more stories left that are even more embarrassing, even more shocking, and even more unforgettable, and I am telling you right now. Number 3 involves a dream that is so specific, so weirdly detailed, and so hilariously timed that when the family member told it, the member in question actually stood up and tried to physically stop them from continuing, on camera, in front of millions of viewers, and that moment alone is worth everything, so don't you dare leave. Number 3. Jimin. The stage genius who dreamed he showed up to his own concert in his underwear and performed the entire show. Number 3, and we are officially in the top 3 now, which means every single story from this point on is elite-level embarrassment. The kind of story that doesn't just make you cringe, it fundamentally alters how you see a person. And the member standing in the crosshairs at number 3 is none other than Park Jimin, the man who is widely considered one of the most captivating performers of his generation. The member whose stage presence is so magnetic that choreographers have literally said on record that Jimin doesn't perform dance, he becomes the dance. The guy who transitioned from traditional Korean dance to contemporary to hip-hop to pop performance with a fluidity that most artists spend lifetimes trying to achieve. The idol whose fan cams break records because people simply cannot stop watching him move. The member who oozes sophistication, sensuality, and absolute control every time he steps onto a stage, and you would genuinely think, that a man this composed, this polished, this devastatingly smooth would be immune to the kind of chaotic family exposure that we've been talking about on this list. But you would be spectacularly wrong, because Jimin's father, the legendary Park Pilwung, a man known for his wholesome parenting energy and his unapologetic love for his son, decided to gift the world a story so perfectly timed, so excruciatingly detailed, and so hilariously vivid that Jimin's reaction to hearing it told live on air has become one of the most replayed moments in Korean variety show history. So here's the setup. It was during one of those special broadcast events where BTS family members were invited to share personal anecdotes, and Jimin's father was sitting there with this gentle, warm demeanor. The kind of dad energy that makes you feel safe and loved just through the screen, and the host asked him, "Is there anything about Jimin that would surprise the fans?" And Papa Park paused for a moment, and you could see him weighing whether or not to do it. There was this visible internal debate happening on his face, this split-second battle between fatherly protectiveness and the irresistible urge to absolutely embarrass his son on national television. And the urge won, because he smiled this knowing little smile and said, "Well, there is the underwear concert dream," and from that moment on, the entire trajectory of Jimin's dignity took a sharp downward turn that it has never fully recovered from. Here's what Papa Park revealed. He said that when Jimin was in his early trainee days, around 15 or 16 years old, when he had just moved to Seoul from Busan to join Big Hit Entertainment and was going through the most intense, pressure-filled period of his young life, he started having this recurring dream, and in this dream, Jimin was performing on an enormous stage in front of thousands and thousands of screaming fans. The lights were blazing, the music was booming, everything was set up for the most epic concert performance of all time, and Dream Jimin was feeling incredible. He was hitting every move, every note, every beat with absolute perfection. The crowd was going insane, and he was having the best moment of his life. But then, at some point during the performance, he would look down and realize that he was wearing nothing but his underwear, not a costume, not a stylish outfit, not even a basic t-shirt and jeans, just his underwear, and not even cool underwear. His father specified plain, basic, everyday underwear, the kind your mom buys in bulk from the market, and the horrifying part of the dream wasn't that the audience noticed. No, the horrifying part was that nobody in the audience seemed to care. They were still cheering, still screaming, still recording, and Dream Jimin was trapped in this nightmare loop where he knew he was basically performing a full concert in his underwear, but he couldn't stop dancing because the choreography was programmed into his body. So he just kept going, executing perfect moves, hitting perfect formations, doing perfect spins and jumps, all while wearing nothing but the most unremarkable underwear in the history of clothing, and every time, without fail. The dream would end at the exact same moment, the moment when he looked up at the giant screen above the stage and saw his own image projected 50 feet tall in his underwear, and that's when he would wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding, immediately checking to make sure he was wearing clothes. Now that alone would have been enough to make this a legendary story, but Papa Park wasn't finished. Oh no, he had more, because he revealed that this dream didn't just happen a few times, it happened regularly for almost an entire year. And it got so persistent and so distressing that Jimin actually started calling home about it, and during those late-night phone calls from his trainee dorm, little teenage Jimin would tell his father about the dream in this worried, anxious voice, and his father would try to comfort him and tell him it was just stress from training, which it almost certainly was, but Jimin being Jimin, the perfectionist, the overthinker, the boy who puts more pressure on himself than anyone else ever could, started developing this superstitious habit because of the dream, and this is the detail that made the entire studio audience absolutely lose it. Papa Park revealed that Jimin started laying out his outfit for the next day before going to sleep, not just casually, but meticulously, perfectly arranged on the floor next to his bed, shirt, pants, socks, shoes, everything positioned exactly as if an invisible person was wearing them. And he did this every single night as a kind of ritual to reassure himself that he would not, under any circumstances, end up anywhere without his clothes, and his roommates at the trainee dorm, including Jungkook and V, who were also trainees at the time, apparently found this behavior absolutely bizarre and would tease him about it endlessly, asking him why there was always a ghost outfit lying on the floor next to his bed, and Jimin never told them the real reason. He just said it was for efficiency, so he could get dressed faster in the morning. And it wasn't until years later when his father told the story that the other members finally understood the truth behind the ghost outfit ritual, and the realization apparently hit them all at once during a group viewing of the segment. And this is where the reaction becomes absolute gold, because according to multiple fan accounts and behind-the-scenes descriptions, Jimin was watching this segment with the other members when his father started telling the story. And at first Jimin was laughing along thinking it would be some innocent childhood memory, but the second his father said underwear concert dream, Jimin's face went through about 17 different emotions in 2 seconds. His eyes went wide. His mouth dropped open. He physically stood up from the couch, pointed at the screen and said, "Appa no," in this voice that was half laughing, half genuinely panicked, and then he tried to grab the remote to change the channel, but the other members literally held him back. Jungkook and V were reportedly holding Jimin's arms while Jin held the remote above his head, and they all watched the rest of the story together while Jimin alternated between hiding his face in a pillow and making these little screaming sounds that the members later described as the sound of a man watching his reputation die in real time. And of course, the aftermath was chaos, absolute beautiful chaos. J-Hope started a running joke where every time BTS was about to go on stage, he would look at Jimin and say, "Jimin, did you check? Are you wearing clothes?" And Jimin would death glare him every single time, but could never actually get mad because he knew it was too funny. Suga apparently went the subtle route and one day just quietly placed a pair of brand new premium designer underwear on Jimin's studio desk with a post-it note that said, "For your next concert, an upgrade," and walked away without ever acknowledging it. And RM, being the thoughtful leader, actually sat down with Jimin and had a genuine conversation about performance anxiety dreams and how they're incredibly common among performers, which was sweet and supportive, but then immediately ruined it by adding, "But the ghost outfit thing is objectively the funniest thing I've ever heard." And Jimin apparently threw a pillow at his face. And what makes this story resonate beyond just the humor is that it reveals something incredibly real and vulnerable about Jimin, because the underwear concert dream is textbook performance anxiety. It's the subconscious manifestation of a young artist's deepest fear of being exposed, of being seen as inadequate, of standing on the world's biggest stage and feeling like you're not enough. And for Jimin, who has spoken openly about his struggles with self-confidence and body image during his trainee years, this dream was clearly his brain processing the enormous pressure he was under, the pressure to be perfect, the pressure to prove that a boy from Busan belonged on that stage, the pressure to live up to expectations that would crush most people. And the fact that he pushed through all of that he took that anxiety and transformed it into the kind of stage presence that leaves audiences literally breathless, that he went from dreaming about being embarrassed on stage to actually being one of the most celebrated performers alive. That journey is honestly inspiring in the most unexpected way. Number 2. V. The iconic visual who dreamed he was a secret agent and woke up interrogating the family dog at 3 a.m. Number 2, and we have officially arrived at the part of this list where embarrassment transcends normal human levels and enters a dimension of chaos that only one specific BTS member could ever occupy. And if you've been following along, if you know even a little bit about the 7 members of this group, then some part of your brain is already whispering the name, because there is only one member of BTS whose energy is so unpredictable, so gloriously bizarre, so completely untethered from the rules of conventional human behavior that a story about him doing something absolutely unhinged in the middle of the night would not only be believable, but almost expected, and that member is Kim Taehyung, the man the world knows as V. The owner of the face that has been voted the most handsome in the world multiple times, the deep-voiced enigma who can go from looking like a Renaissance painting to acting like a chaotic 5-year-old in the span of 3 seconds, the member whose brain operates on a frequency that scientists have not yet discovered and whose family, specifically his beloved grandmother and his father, decided to share a story so wildly unbelievable, so cinematically absurd, and so thoroughly documented with actual home video evidence that when it finally reached the public, it didn't just trend on social media, it fundamentally rewired how millions of people understood the concept of Kim Taehyung as a human being. So let me set the scene, because the context matters. During a special holiday broadcast segment, V's grandmother, who is one of the most beloved figures in the entire BTS extended universe, a woman whose warmth and love for her grandson has made fans around the world cry on multiple occasions, appeared alongside V's father to share family memories, and everything was going beautifully. They talked about little Taehyung growing up in Gyeocheong, about how he used to run through the fields and play in the rivers, about how he was always singing and always making people smile, classic heartwarming family content that had everyone in their feelings, and then the host made the fatal mistake of asking, did Taehyung ever do anything unusual in his sleep? And V's grandmother and father exchanged this look, this loaded, knowing, we've been waiting for this moment look, and V's father reached into a bag he had brought with him and pulled out an actual physical DVD, and he said, very calmly, we brought the evidence, and the studio audience erupted because they knew something legendary was about to happen. Here's the story, and I need you to understand that every single detail I'm about to share was confirmed by V's own family on camera with video evidence to back it up. When Taehyung was about 9 or 10 years old, he went through an intense phase of watching spy movies and secret agent shows. The kid was absolutely consumed by the world of espionage. He watched every James Bond film he could get his hands on. He was obsessed with a Korean spy drama that was popular at the time. He even started wearing his grandfather's old sunglasses around the house and speaking in a deliberately deeper voice because he thought that's how real agents talked, and his family thought it was adorable and harmless. Just a kid going through a phase, nothing to worry about. Until the dreams started. V's father explained that Taehyung began having these incredibly vivid, elaborate dreams where he was a top-secret international spy on critical missions, and unlike normal dreams that you forget by morning, Taehyung would wake up and describe these dreams in extraordinary detail, like full narrative arcs with villains and plot twists and chase sequences, and his family just thought he had a wild imagination, which he obviously did. But what they didn't realize was that these dreams were starting to bleed into his waking life in ways that nobody anticipated. And then came the night that the family captured on home video, the night that would eventually be broadcast to millions of people and cement Kim Taehyung's reputation as the most beautifully chaotic human being on planet Earth. V's father explained that at approximately 3 o'clock in the morning, he was woken up by strange sounds coming from the living room, and when he quietly crept out to investigate, what he found was so bewildering, so completely inexplicable, and so perfectly Taehyung that his first instinct, instead of intervening, was to grab the family camcorder, and thank God he did, because what he recorded is genuinely one of the greatest pieces of home video footage in the history of parenting. There, in the dimly lit living room of their family home in Gyeocheong, was 9-year-old Kim Taehyung, fully asleep, sleepwalking, wearing his grandfather's oversized trench coat that was dragging on the floor behind him like a cape. The old sunglasses perched on his face even though it was pitch dark, and he was sitting cross-legged on the floor directly in front of the family dog, a small, extremely confused Shih Tzu named Sunshim, and he was interrogating the dog. Not playing with the dog, not petting the dog, interrogating the dog, like a full-blown spy movie interrogation scene, and the video, which was played on the broadcast, showed little Taehyung leaning forward towards Sunshim with this intensely serious expression on his sleeping face, pointing at the dog, and saying in this hilariously deep, dramatic whisper, I know you have the codes, tell me where they are, we don't have much time. The enemy is coming, and Sunshim, this tiny innocent, absolutely bewildered dog, was just sitting there with her head tilted to the side, tail wagging slightly, having absolutely no idea why her small human was dressed like a tiny detective and demanding classified information from her at 3 in the morning. And it didn't stop there, oh no, because the video showed that Taehyung's sleepwalking spy interrogation went on for nearly 15 minutes, and during those 15 minutes, he covered an astonishing range of espionage scenarios. He accused Sunshim of being a double agent. He told her that headquarters had sent him personally because this was a matter of national security. He offered her what he called immunity if she cooperated, which apparently meant extra treats. He even did this thing where he pretended to receive a call on an invisible earpiece, turned away from the dog, and whispered, "The target is not cooperating," requesting permission to use advanced tactics, and then turned back to Sunshim and said, "Last chance," with the most dramatic delivery a sleeping 9-year-old has ever achieved. And throughout all of this, Sunshim just sat there, occasionally licking Taehyung's hand, completely unbothered, completely unaware that she was apparently sitting on top secret intelligence that could save the world. V's father said he recorded the entire thing because he genuinely couldn't believe what he was seeing, and he was laughing so hard behind the camera that you could hear him trying to muffle his laughter on the video, and eventually, after the 15-minute interrogation yielded no results because, surprisingly, the dog did not have the codes, Taehyung slowly stood up, saluted Sunshim, said, "You're a worthy opponent, we'll meet again," in that deep spy voice, and then shuffled back to his bedroom, climbed into bed, and went right back to normal sleep. And the next morning when his family asked him about it, he had absolutely zero memory of anything. He didn't remember the trench coat, the sunglasses, the interrogation, nothing. And when they showed him the video, his reaction was this perfect mix of confusion, horror, and a tiny bit of pride, because even at 9 years old, some part of Taehyung appreciated the theatrical commitment of his own subconscious. Now when this video was played on the broadcast, the studio absolutely exploded. The hosts were crying laughing, the audience was on their feet, and the clip immediately went viral in a way that few BTS-related clips ever have. Because it was just so perfectly, so undeniably, so cosmically Taehyung, the theatricality, the commitment to character, the absurd dialogue, the dramatic pacing, the fact that he chose to interrogate a dog. Every single element of this story was like a concentrated essence of everything that makes Kim Taehyung the most unpredictable and entertaining member of BTS. And predictably, the BTS members had an absolute field day. Jimin reportedly watched the video 17 times in a row and was still laughing on the 17th viewing. Jin declared it the greatest piece of cinema ever produced and demanded that V's father submit it to film festivals. Suga said just 3 words, "That explains everything," and everyone knew exactly what he meant. RM called it the most Taehyung thing that has ever Taehyunged. J-Hope recreated the interrogation scene with his own dog Mickey in a video that went viral in its own right, and Jungkook, in the most savage move of all, apparently edited the video footage to add dramatic spy movie music, lens flares, and subtitles, and sent it to the group chat titled Agent V. The Geochang files, and Taehyung reportedly didn't respond for a full 24 hours, which in the BTS group chat is the equivalent of a diplomatic silence, a strategic retreat, an acknowledgement that there is simply no comeback powerful enough to overcome video evidence of yourself interrogating a Shih Tzu about nuclear codes while sleepwalking in your grandfather's trench coat. Number 1. Jungkook. The golden magne who dreamed he married a banana and threw an entire wedding ceremony in his sleep. And here we are, number 1, the absolute summit of this list, the story that sits at the very top because it is, without question, the most bizarre, the most detailed, the most spectacularly embarrassing dream revelation that has ever come out of any BTS family member's mouth, and the idol at the center of this legendary tale is the one and only Jungkook, the golden magne. The youngest member of BTS, the human embodiment of the phrase, good at everything, the guy who can sing, dance, rap, produce, paint, film, edit, do archery, play sports, cook, and somehow still look like a Greek god doing all of it. the member who has been setting records since he was 15 years old, the artist whose solo debut 7 and Standing Next to You shattered streaming records worldwide, the man who literally grew up in front of the entire planet and somehow only got more talented, more charming, and more impressive with every passing year, and you would logically assume that the Golden Magne, the guy who seems to have been genetically engineered for perfection, would be safe from the kind of devastating family exposure that we've been witnessing on this list, but that assumption would be the biggest mistake of your life. Because Jungkook's older brother, Jonghyun, a man who has proven time and time again that the sacred bond of brotherhood means absolutely nothing when there's a funny story to be told, delivered what can only be described as the nuclear bomb of embarrassing dream revelations, a story so magnificently absurd that it didn't just break the internet, it shattered it into a million pieces and rearranged them into the shape of a banana wearing a wedding veil. Here's what happened. During a family special that had already delivered incredible content from the other members' families, Jonghyun came on as the final family guest, and there was already this energy in the studio, this anticipation. Because everyone knew that the Magne's brother was going to bring something special, and Jonghyun, who shares Jungkook's good looks but carries himself with this calm, almost mischievous older brother energy, sat down, looked directly at the camera, and said, "I've been saving this story for a special occasion, and I think today is that day," and the audience was already buzzing because the setup alone was devastating. Jonghyun began by explaining that when Jungkook was about 6 years old, he went through what the family internally refers to as the banana period, and yes, that is an actual term that the John family uses to this day. And it refers to a stretch of several months where young Jungkook developed what can only be described as an all-consuming, deeply personal, almost spiritual attachment to bananas, not eating bananas, although he did eat a lot of them, but bananas as objects, as companions, as what 6-year-old Jungkook apparently considered to be the most perfect things in the entire universe. Jonghyun said it started innocently enough. Jungkook just really liked bananas. He liked the taste. He liked the color. He liked the shape. He liked how easy they were to peel, and his family thought it was just a typical kid food obsession. But then it escalated, because Jungkook started carrying a banana with him everywhere, not to eat, just to have, like a comfort object. He would take a banana to kindergarten. He would hold a banana while watching TV. He would sleep with a banana on his pillow next to his head, and when that banana inevitably turned brown and mushy, he would get genuinely emotional about it and insist on a proper goodbye before his parents threw it away. And then he would immediately adopt a new banana and start the cycle all over again, and his parents were equal parts amused and mildly concerned. But the dream, the one that earned the story the #1 spot on our list, happened during the peak of the banana period, and what Jonghyun described next is something that no amount of preparation can truly ready you for. He said that one night, the entire John household was woken up at approximately 2 in the morning by the sound of young Jungkook talking loudly in his sleep, and when his parents and Jonghyun rushed to his room, they found 6-year-old Jungkook standing on his bed, eyes closed, completely asleep, holding a banana in one hand and his favorite stuffed bunny toy in the other, and he was conducting what appeared to be a wedding ceremony, his wedding ceremony. And the bride was the banana. Jonghyun said they stood in the doorway in absolute shock as sleeping Jungkook, with the solemnity and gravity of a tiny unconscious priest/groom, was reciting what he apparently believed were wedding vows to this banana, and the vows, oh the vows. Jonghyun remembered them in painful detail because they were so spectacularly absurd that the family talked about them for years afterward. Little Jungkook was saying things like, "I promise to never eat you. I promise to keep you yellow forever. I promise to take you to school every day, and I promise you will be the only banana in my life." And he was saying this with such sincere, heartfelt emotion in his tiny sleeping voice that his mother actually had to cover her mouth to keep from laughing so loud that it woke him up, and his father was standing there with tears streaming down his face from trying to hold in his laughter. And Jonghyun himself had to leave the room at one point because he was about to absolutely lose it. But it didn't end with the vows, because sleepwalking Jungkook then proceeded to conduct the entire rest of the wedding ceremony. He turned to the stuffed bunny, who was apparently serving as the officiant, and said, "You may now say we are married." And then he turned to an invisible audience that existed only in his dream and announced, "Thank you all for coming to my wedding. Please enjoy the cake." And then, and this is the detail that absolutely destroyed everyone who heard it, he slow danced with the banana. This 6-year-old boy, standing on his bed in his little pajamas, eyes completely shut, swaying gently back and forth while holding a banana against his chest like it was the love of his life. Humming a song that Youngyun later identified as a lullaby their mother used to sing to them, and the whole thing lasted nearly 10 minutes before Jungkook gently laid the banana on the pillow next to him, whispered, "Good night, my wife," pulled the blanket over both himself and the banana, and went back to peaceful, normal sleep, leaving his entire family standing in the doorway in a state of emotional ruin, caught somewhere between hysterical laughter and genuine awe at the theatrical commitment of their youngest son. Now here's where it gets even more legendary, because Youngyun revealed that this wasn't a one-night event. The banana wedding happened 3 more times over the following weeks, and each time, the ceremony was slightly different. Like Jungkook's subconscious was refining and improving the wedding with each iteration. The second time he added a ring exchange, using a hair tie. The third time he included what Youngyun described as a very emotional toast to the banana's parents, which were apparently 2 other bananas from the fruit bowl that Jungkook had placed on his nightstand. And the fourth and final time, the ceremony included a first dance that was significantly more choreographed than the first one, almost as if even in his sleep. The future golden magne was already perfecting his performance skills. And the photographic evidence that Youngyun mentioned, oh yes, it exists, because after the first banana wedding, Jungkook's father started keeping a camera near the bedroom door, and he managed to capture several photos of sleeping Jungkook mid-ceremony, including one absolutely iconic photo of tiny Jungkook slow dancing with the banana that Youngyun held up during the broadcast, and the studio audience reaction to seeing that photo was so loud, so explosive, so unanimously hysterical that the sound levels apparently peaked the audio equipment, and the hosts couldn't speak for nearly a full minute. When this story hit the internet, the response was nothing short of nuclear. Within hours it was trending worldwide. Banana wedding was the #1 trending topic on Twitter in multiple countries. Fan artists created hundreds of illustrations of little Jungkook marrying a banana. Someone made an animated short film that got tens of millions of views. A bakery in Seoul actually created a Jungkook banana wedding cake that sold out within hours, and ARMY collectively decided that this was the single greatest piece of BTS lore that had ever been unearthed, surpassing even the most iconic run BTS moments. The BTS members' reactions were, predictably, absolutely savage and absolutely hilarious. Jin bought an actual bunch of bananas and arranged them in the studio like a wedding audience with tiny drawn-on faces. V sent Jungkook a formal wedding invitation that read, "You are cordially invited to the vow renewal ceremony of John Jungkook and Mrs. Banana," with an RSVP card and everything. Suga produced a 15-second beat that sampled Jungkook's voice saying, "Good night, my wife," that he threatened to release as a single. J-Hope choreographed a mock banana wedding first dance and performed it during a break in rehearsals. Jimin gifted Jungkook a single banana with a tiny veil made of tissue paper on his birthday. And RM wrote a haiku about the banana wedding that read, "Yellow love bloom soft / pajamas and moonlit vows / the magne said yes," and framed it in Jungkook's studio. And Jungkook's reaction to all of this was the most Alright, so we just went through all 7 stories, and before we close out, let's take a step back, because when you line up all of these dreams side by side, something incredible emerges, a pattern, a truth. A revelation about BTS that goes far deeper than the comedy. At number 7, we had J-Hope, the dance king who once dreamed of being a farmer, a little boy from Gwangju who wanted nothing more than to grow watermelons and raise cows. And that same all-or-nothing passion he had for farming is the exact same fire that made him one of the greatest performers alive today. At number 6, Jean showed us that worldwide handsome started as a boy who wanted to be a fairy princess, dressed in aluminum foil and a pink towel, marching into kindergarten with zero shame and that fearless, unapologetic confidence is the exact same energy that makes him the most comfortable in his own skin idol in the industry. At number 5, RM. The genius with the 148 IQ was having recurring nightmares about a vengeful potato army with a general in a tiny hat, and that wildly vivid imagination, that ability to build entire worlds inside his head, is the same creative engine that powers some of the most brilliant lyrics in modern music. At number 4, Suga, the king of cool, the untouchable savage, was meowing in his sleep like a baby kitten and kneading his pillow with his tiny paws, and that independent, affection on my own terms. I'll sleep when I want cat energy became his entire legendary personality. At number 3, Jimin, the perfect performer, was dreaming about performing entire concerts in his underwear, haunted by the fear of being exposed and not being enough, and he took that anxiety, that pressure, that vulnerability, and transformed it into a stage presence so powerful that it literally stops people in their tracks. At number 2, Thea was sleepwalking through his house in a trench coat, interrogating the family dog about secret codes at 3 in the morning, and that boundless, untamed, gloriously weird imagination is the same force that makes him the most unpredictable and creatively fearless artist in the group. And at number 1, Jungkook, the golden magne, was marrying a banana in his sleep, conducting full wedding ceremonies with vows and first dances and toasts to the banana's parents, and that pure, wholehearted, all-in commitment to loving what he loves without reservation is the exact same energy that made him a global superstar who gives everything to his craft and his fans. And here's the thing that ties it all together. Every single one of these dreams, as funny and embarrassing as they are, reveals the exact personality trait that made each member extraordinary. The dreams didn't just predict who they would become. They were early glimpses of who they already were. 7 boys with 7 wildly different inner worlds, 7 completely unique ways of seeing life, 7 beautiful, messy, hilarious, deeply human souls who somehow found each other and became the biggest group the world has ever seen. So the next time you watch BTS perform on stage and wonder what makes them so special, so magnetic, so impossible to look away from, just remember, you're watching a farmer, a fairy princess, a potato nightmare survivor, a baby kitten, an underwear concert performer, a secret agent, and a banana's husband, and together, they changed the world. Thank you so much for staying until the end. If this video made you laugh, think, or feel even a little bit of something, smash that like button, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you never miss another video. And drop a comment telling us which dream was your favorite. Was it Suga's kitten era, V's dog interrogation, or Jungkook's banana wedding? Let us know. Until next time, stay curious, stay entertained, and remember, even the biggest stars in the universe started as kids with the weirdest dreams imaginable. Peace.